chapter 2. It's taken us a month, or 2 months actually. Not quite 2 months, but we finally get to move into the second chapter here and start to look at the beginning of the conquest of the Israelites to the Promised Land. So, of course, you know the story very well here of Jericho and Rahab and all the things that happened. But that's what we're going to be looking at over the next couple of weeks. Looking at this first thing, the first lesson here in chapter 2, we'll be looking at the sovereignty, God's sovereign power, and that kind of as the spies visit Jericho is where we're going to start here. That the people that are in Jericho, of course, responding to the spies, responding in turn, I guess, to God's sovereign power with dread and fear, and then Rahab kind of emerging out of all this, responding with faith in God. Of course, we know the end of the story with Rahab. We'll get to that later on too, but that was, and that's kind of what we're going to kind of be looking at here as we move through these couple of verses here in chapter 2. What is the most amazing feat, thing, event that you have ever seen or witnessed in person? Most amazing thing, feat, event that you have witnessed in person. Anybody have an answer that you can think of? Like, it doesn't have to be like churchy, like just something that's been amazing that you've seen or witnessed. Huh? Birth of a child. Yeah, that's something. Anything else? Nobody have anything? I've got one that sticks in my brain to this day. It was this 8th grader sitting in Miss Baker's English class at Irvington High School out in the Annex building. And I had just asked Miss Baker to spell a word because we were writing something, and she, as she always did, when she asked her to spell something, she would spell the word. Yes, Lance, I can spell that for you. Dictinary. Make you look it up in the dictionary. She did it every time. So, all right, Miss Baker, I go over and get a dictionary because we didn't have internet, we didn't have phones and stuff. I'm dating myself here a little bit, right? I'm getting to that point. Didn't have phones or anything, so we'd walk over to the shelf and grab a dictionary and flip through and try to figure out what the word was. And for some reason, she flipped the TV on in the rooms. And at, I guess it was 9, whatever time it was, we watched planes flying over the towers, right? And I'll never forget that. It was one of those feats, right? One of those things, an event, that witness that, I'll never ever forget. And then, of course, the events, kind of the rest of the day, the things that happened after it. But I remember her flipping that TV on, and like everybody, a bunch of 8th graders chattering and moving on. Like everybody got quiet because we were kind of watching that thing happen. Now, it's a lot of times, especially that moment, to younger generation, it's kind of an afterthought, right? But I guarantee each one of you can remember where you were at when that happened, right? Absolutely. That was, not a great thing, but something that was an event that I witnessed that had an impact that I can most definitely remember. Birth of our kids, sure. An event that I witnessed that I will definitely remember. It's kind of watching things, right, or things that have amazing impacts on us, and then the response of those amazing things that happen, and how it demonstrates like the ability to have an impact on you. Okay, God has done also, of course, we know some amazing feats that have demonstrated His power. The Battle of Jericho is one of those. Crossing of the Red Sea, right? Plagues in Egypt, all these things. Battle of Jericho was a feat that God's power was on display, and that is what I'm kind of going to look at here today. All right, so let's read the first 7 verses of chapter 2 of the book of Joshua, and we'll get into, first of all, Jericho's weakness as well as Jericho's cowardice. First 7 verses here. And Joshua the son of Nun sent out Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, "Go view the land, even Jericho." And they went, and came into a harlot's house named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, there came men in hither tonight, the children of Israel, to search out the country." And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, "Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country." And the woman took 2 men and hid them, and said, "Thus there came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were." And it came to pass about the time of the shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither? The men went, "I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. All right, so Joshua here sent some spies into the first city that they are going to conquer in the Promised Land. Okay, first city they came to, of course, was Jericho, and Joshua is sending these spies out to spy, right? Exactly what they're doing. They're going to look at the territory, particularly, of course, Jericho, the very first encounter here, and see what the enemy looked like. All right, this is a recon operation here to get some information. They wanted to know how strong the enemy was, right? How well fortified the city was, how powerful the military was, all the things you would want to know before you go in and try to conquer somebody. Joshua is sending these spies here. And this well-fortified city is in central Canaan. Okay? Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly. And then they went, of course, to Jericho. So central Canaan here is where this is at. Now, we don't see whether God has approved this mission of the spies or not approved it. It's not really mentioned anywhere in the text, but it does say that Joshua intended the spies to go into Jericho, and it says specifically, verse 1, 2 men to spy what? What's the word it uses there? Secretly. Okay. So maybe these spies that were going to Rahab's house, eventually end up at Rahab's house, are using Joshua's instructions to maybe blend in. And since Rahab, of course, is a harlot, there would be people coming in and out of her house a lot. So it was most likely frequented quite a bit by strangers passing through the land. So this is probably the reason why that they went there. Now, again, we don't see any direction here of God that they were supposed to do this. But we do know that Joshua is God's man and leading accordingly, and we don't really see God like countering this decision anywhere. Okay, and I just want to point out, and I haven't read through all of the book of Joshua yet, so we may get there eventually. But all of chapter 1, what side of the Jordan River are the Israelites on? The west side. Most right. What side of the land of Canaan is on, where does the land of Canaan lie? On the eastern side. So the people of Israel are going to have to do what to get into Canaan? Cross the Jordan River. We don't really see yet, right? And again, maybe it should tell, I don't know, Pastor Rob say anything later about, I have not read all through the book yet. Did it say anything later about them crossing the Jordan River to get into the... Chapter 3. So we're getting there, right? That's right. They put the altar up, right? That's right. Yeah, that's correct. I forgot about that. But at some point here, these guys have had to have crossed the Jordan River, ford across the Jordan River, I guess, to get over into Canaan, and then travel a pretty good piece into the kind of center area of Canaan to figure out what is exactly going on here with this first country that they are conquering. So we don't see exactly how they got across yet, right? Not these men, at least. But that's something that does happen and has happened, and they're on this spy mission. And again, we don't see anywhere in which the Lord has well, I don't want to say honor it, but we don't see him kind of telling Joshua not to do this either, okay? So what we do, though, is that these spies show up to Rahab's house, which is a harlot, and which, again, allows them to blend in pretty easily. It's pretty common for foreigners to kind of frequent this place. Her residence as well was a good place to gain information about the city, and to also maybe hear what the people were saying about Israel being close by to the city, right? Their presence on the east there of the Jordan River. So while the text doesn't say so, we can be assured here that God is obviously sovereignly working and obviously sovereignly directing the spies into Rahab's house, right? This is, there's on the walls in the city, plenty of houses, right? So it was obviously some divine intervention here that these men got to where they got to. We can see God's sovereign hand working here. Now, at the time, she is the only person in the city who sympathizes with the Israelites. Anybody else caught these spies, probably would have killed them, right? Or at least put them in jail or hung them up somewhere or strung them up somewhere, done something to them, try to get information out of them, right? Rahab is, in fact, the only sympathizer with the Israelites. No one else in the city would have told the spies as well about the extent of the people of Jericho's fear of the Israelites, right? As we can see, so unaware of the fact that the people of Jericho were fearful of the Israelites, we continue to see God's working on behalf of the Israelites, in behalf of the, even though the spies were presumably unaware of the fear, the fears are already there, right? And later on, they are going to reflect on the events as strong evidence of God's sovereignty working for them before they go over and begin to conquer the promised land, okay? But apparently, as you get into verse 2, the spies didn't really do a very good job blending in very long. Because it didn't take very long for a report came back to the king of Jericho that they were there. Right, verse 2, and it was told to the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. So they tried to blend in. They didn't blend in for very long. Word gets back to the king that the Israelites are there, and that they are in there spying to figure out what is going on within the city. so they can begin, I guess, to conquer, to come in. Right? There's obviously some fear here that has been planted of the Jerichoites, of the Israelites. Okay. Now, it's important for us we understand here that the discovery of the men, the spies, was simply just part of God's plan. Right? If God wanted to keep them incognito, He would have kept them incognito. He did not. He wanted them to be found out. This was all kind of part of the plan. But the spies themselves, of course, no doubt, were probably pretty nervous, right, about being discovered as the enemy in the city, thinking that they're probably going to get at the very least, thrown into jail somewhere, but more than likely probably get killed. So we can understand their concern as well. So, the king of Jericho sends men here to Rahab with a message to her to bring the spies that people saw going into her house, to bring those spies out, and it was a very clear warning to Rahab as well that if she didn't produce the spies that people saw going in and he got the report of, then all of Jericho, including Rahab's family, were all going to be at risk of being destroyed by Israel. Right? Look at verse 3 here. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. So the king of Jericho is aware, this is an important point here for us to kind of bring out. The king of Jericho is aware that the Israelites probably have the ability to do what? Conquer, right? Conquer. Now, let's talk about Jericho for a second. Okay? Walls Jericho, really big, really thick, really strong. This is a city that has been there in the area of Canaan for hundreds of years probably, maybe even more than that. The army itself is pretty powerful. And as again, I've mentioned this a couple times before, they have done quite a bit of excavation in that area here, archaeological excavation in the last decade. And I think as of like 6 months ago, I was recently reading, but as of 6 months ago, they found this wreckage, this archaeological dig, of which they believe to be the ancient city of Jericho, is close to the same place. And one of the things that they have found is at the base of what they think is maybe one of the corners of the old walls, they found what looks like to be an observation tower. Okay, and the archaeologists, have done quite a bit of excavation around the area, and what they have said is that the observation towers, plural, that were at this site, which they believe to be Jericho, were the tallest of the observation towers, or tallest of anything they found in that area. Like, this was like one of the walls of Jericho would have been like the tallest, probably some of the tallest walls in the area. And they found evidence that in these observation towers, like they have reconstructed or whatever, right, through the rubble that's there. I can't give you all the legalese sciences over this, kind of what the report said. Multiple windows and being able to see all 365, 180 degrees around, 360 degrees around, and completely all the way around, and had areas. They had archers set up that you couldn't shoot back into. It was a very, very detailed and very, very well fortified city. Okay, is kind of the point that I'm trying to get to. And they found evidence of all these things. Quick Google search, archaeological dig in Jericho will tell you the same thing. But even with all that, the king obviously knew that the Israelites' reputation probably preceded them somewhat. Okay, they have, even though it's been 40 years since the Egypt antics had happened, the reputation was still there. And obviously the king of Jericho was concerned and worried about the ability for the Israelites to come in and to conquer them. So that's the warning here that he gives to Rahab, hoping that her sense of loyalty to her city and to her people would motivate her to kind of comply with the command. But Rahab decided to take a risk here instead of playing it safe. Right? Verse 4, and the woman took the two men and hid them, and said, Thus there came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. So she subsides here with the Israelites and tells them that, obviously, hey, people are looking for you. Take you, I'm going to hide you. And verse 6, we see where she hides them at. We know the story very well, right? That she brought them up to the roof of the house. Of course, there's flax and things that we laid on top of the roof, and she hid them in underneath the stalks of flax and made them wait there as essentially that the king's guard or the men came and kind of did a search of the place to find out if they were there. She was hiding them in some form of food, right? So she admitted to the messengers that men came to her, but then she lied about knowing who they were. She further lied by saying the men fled through the gates when they came and asked about it, and then Rahab then suggested that the men go after the spies, right? Because they had fled, right? Verse 5. So we see verses 4 and 5 here. Hid them, verse 5, came to pass, shutting the gate. Hey, they left. You need to go after them. Right? So that's what Rahab did to help protect the Israelite spies. Their departure in verse 7 gives Rahab time to talk to the spies about God, her people, and her faith, right? So verse 6, she hides them, tells them they're gone. She goes up and tells them, verse 7, the men now are gone, and they pursue after them the way to the Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. Okay. So now obviously there's some time here in which Rahab talks to these men. And we'll see that here as kind of continue to move through this, all right? So how would you now describe the king of Jericho's power or strength or confidence in his ability to keep his city safe? How would you describe the king of Jericho? Concerned, weak, even maybe, right? Not sovereign, right? Even Rahab, who was just a lowly harlot, right, was able to do what to the king of Jericho? Yeah, she tricked him, right? She tricked him, as in gave him the old bait and switch, right, and fooled him. And she was able to do that and his men, and kind of sent them off on this pointless search. Okay, now one might say here that faith like Rahab's, that is mingled with what did Rahab do? We can talk. What did she do? She lied. She's a prostitute, yes, but she lied a couple of times. She was deceitful, right? And so you might say that a faith like Rahab's, which is intertwined here, mingled with lies and deceptions, is not much of a faith. But it's important for us to remember that Rahab's faith was rather uninformed. Okay, she did not yet have God's law as her guide. She didn't. She was essentially here an enemy of the king of Jericho in wartime, potential wartime. So perhaps there is room for deception in wartime. But whether her lie was wrong here, not the point of this passage. So it's important not to get hung up on the morality of what she did. Okay? Because Rahab, not a very moral person to start with anyways, right? She's a harlot here. But what you do see Rahab doing is showing some faith in the Israelites' God, because she's taking care of these men, right? And lying for them and doing some immoral things, right? Not saying that what Rahab did was right? Obviously not. But if she would have told the king the truth, what would have happened to the men? They would have died, right? And God's men, the Israelites, are trying to do what? They're trying to take over this city, right? They are in turn in part of all of this, right? So we can see why that she did what she did and how God allowed an immoral lady to make maybe some immoral decisions, but in turn, that what she was doing was helping the men of God. Okay? So Rahab returns to the spies here in verse number 8 with the fate of her people seemingly at her hands, right? Verse 8. And before, of chapter 2, verse 8, and before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof. Verse 9, and she said unto them, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did unto the kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, of whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you, for the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. So Rahab returns to the spies and tells them at that moment, right, there was no person that was more powerful, at that moment, there is no person in all of Jericho that is more powerful than Rahab. Rahab, though, here is not concerned with the power that she essentially has here, right, for the entire city of Jericho. She's not concerned with that at all. Instead, she confesses on how the people of the city of Jericho felt about Israel's impending entrance into the land. Right? And we see that there in verses, all the way down to verse 11. She talks about the terror that has fallen upon the people, the inhabitants of the land. She uses the word faint because of the Israelites. They were so afraid of the Israelites because of what they heard that God has done for them, that all of their courage have completely melted away. They had no will or want to fight at all. And later on, we see this kind of come to fruition because nobody raised an arm as the Israelites begin to their attack by marching around the outside. Right? We know that they march around the city of Jericho, and we never see anybody like up with an arrow trying to shoot them because they're so fearful and so concerned for what they're able to do through God's power, right? Rahab adds here that the Canaanites' faint-heartedness was a direct result of the report of what God had already done for the Israelites. So let's pause for just a second. You've got this huge city that is very powerful, whose walls are practically impenetrable. It's been there for years and years and years and years and years. And those people are so concerned with what the Israelites coming in and taking over because of what they have heard that God has done. Now, the people that were in Jericho didn't watch those Israelites walk across the Red Sea. Probably didn't see it, right? They had heard of the story, of course, from 4 decades previously. They have heard about what they had done on the eastern side of the river, completely destroying the Amorites. And just that reputation had them to a point that they did not want to fight, right? God has promised the Israelites, let's look on the other side of the coin here. God has promised the Israelites that if they are faithful to Him, He will always give them the victory. And then He gives them evidence of this, right? In Jericho, the very first city that they come to, they ain't got to do nothing but walk around the walls. And the people of Jericho, they had observation towers. They could just pick them off with arrows if they wanted to. And they did nothing about it. And we know eventually what happens to the walls of Jericho. Right? Walls came tumbling down. and they completely destroy the whole city and didn't have to even raise a sword. But yet we know that later on through the story here in the book of Joshua, eventually the Israelites do what? Do they fully conquer the land of Canaan? Why do they not fully conquer the land of Canaan? Because they get what? Scared, worried, afraid. Forget what God has done for them just back a few weeks earlier, a month earlier in Jericho. So it's like you read this and you see that, hey guys, you got the whole city is worried, and then you walk around outside for days and it falls in. Just walk around all the cities. Let God take care of all the work. But they get in their own way. And we read this, and as we read through this, we think, man, these Israelites, these dum-dums don't get it, can't figure it out, right? But we see the pattern emerge in us the same way. Right? We should rely on God, and God has promised that He's going to take care of us, feeds the birds, right? Takes care of the flowers. He's going to promise that He's going to take care of us, but we, these big dum-dums, chief of the dum-dums standing up here, can't get out of our own way enough to allow God to take control and do what He's promised us that He can do. So yeah, we're going to, maybe make fun of the Israelites a little bit as we go through this, right? But we have to remember just a perfect identification, a lineup, perfect comparison to us in our lives as Christians. So these men have heard this from Rahab. We're going to come back to Rahab, probably get to her a little more next week. But these men have now heard from Rahab that everybody's scared to death. They heard what God has done. Everybody's scared to death. They realize here that the inhabitants of Jericho, right, have learned that God is more powerful than any part of the Jordan River, that God is more powerful than any people or God that they are serving. The people of Jericho are evidence that they believe that God is more powerful than anything and that He fights for the Israelites. He's more powerful than any armor of men. And they ain't done nothing yet. They ain't done nothing. Jericho's fear of both Israel and of God make them desperate, and anxious, like verse 11, right? As soon as we heard these things, Rahab says, our hearts did melt, and there was no more, and did there remain any more courage in any man because of you, for the Lord your God. And Rahab goes on to describe, now were there false gods in Jericho? You can do this. Absolutely. All of the heathenites, right? All throughout the land of Canaan is littered with what? False gods, right? Rahab has seen and probably worshipped some of these false gods even. But she realizes that, verse 11, that there is nobody, right? He is the God of heaven above and in the earth beneath. That respect of the totality of everything that God is in charge of, essentially, and is in powerful of. Rahab realizes that. So Jericho's anxiety here was likely the reason that the king wanted to keep the spies from getting back. Right now, these guys have showed up. Everybody's scared of them. They realize that now. They want to go back and tell Joshua, hey, this is going to be easy. Everybody's scared to death. So he doesn't want them to get back. Right? He wants to kill them. So they can't get back and tell them that everybody's scared. Right? We see why the king's so concerned with this here. He didn't want Israel to know. Jericho never responded to God with repentance. Instead, they rejected God's merciful revelation of Himself as the God in the heaven above and in the earth beneath. Their fear of God left them frozen and faithless inside of their walls. Right? What do you think would have happened if the people of Jericho had turned to God? It's total theoretical, right? This didn't happen. What do you think, though, would have probably happened if the people of Jericho would have realized that, hey, they're coming in, their God's more powerful than our gods. If they would have all repented, what would have happened? What do you think?
Same thing that happened in Nineveh.
Right, and what happened in Nineveh, Pastor Rob?
There was a great
revival of people, right? Probably the same thing would have happened to Jericho. Probably wouldn't have been destroyed. May have still been there today, right? If the people would have just repented. But they saw the power and might of God and looked at it as fearful and faithless against it, instead of understanding and accepting that it was, that it is the true way of how they should have been living. Okay? So 3 words here describing the people of Jericho: helpless, hopeless, and heightened in fear. Right? That's where we're at here with the people of Jericho. Okay? Go ahead, Chad. So we see Jericho's weakness and their cowardness, and then we get into go back to the second one. We get into verse number 12. We see Rahab's response here with faith. And we're not going to get into this today because I've only got about 4 minutes left, but I do want to read these 3 verses as we kind of prepare for next week. So verse number 12. Now, therefore, this is Rahab, I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that ye will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token, that ye will save alive my father and mother, and my brethren, and my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the men answered her, Our lives for your lives, if ye utter not this our business. And it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truthfully with thee. So we see Rahab here. I have a request. Listen, guys, I protected you, lied for you, made sure you didn't get captured. Just make sure that we're okay when you guys coming in. I know you're coming. I know we can't stop you. Make sure that you promised me, make sure that me and my house, me and my family are okay. And show kindness unto me. Okay? Of course, we know, right? Scarlet cord comes down, walls come down, Jericho. We know the story happens here. But as we get into more of this next week, we're going to take a little more of a little deeper look, I guess, at Rahab and what she was kind of able to do and what happened because of this as we get moving to this next week. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, here we thank you for this just an awesome story here of the people of Israel, of the conquering of Jericho, and then how you are sovereign through all, and that eventually Rahab, the old harlot, was immoral and made some faithful decisions and showed her faithfulness, how she was eventually mentioned and brought, Lord, to glory for what she was able to do. And we're just it's always awesome as we move into this more next week, Lord. It's always awesome to see how, you just don't care about what type of people are being used. You just want people who are faithful. And it's just always such an awesome reminder for us, Lord, and I pray that it continues to be so, that, we're not great a lot of times. We should constantly be trying to be better at worshiping and serving you. You just require faithfulness. That's what you're looking for. It's people who are faithful to you. And I pray that we here at Faith Bible Church, the name outside, is the characteristic of us as the people that are here. Because you can do some mighty things with some faithful people. And I pray, Lord, as we continue to move through this story and move through these conquests and move through this book, through this lesson series, Lord, that if nothing else, we get a rekindling, a refortification of our own faithfulness to you. Because it's so incredibly important to our daily walk, Lord. Pray for Pastor Rob here as he comes in the next little bit too. And you'll use him this morning. He was attentive to your word, Lord. We love you and thank you. And I pray. Amen.